Jack was a quiet, lonesome cowboy who earned his keep by working odd jobs, tending horses, or mending fences. He was known for his fierce independence and keen skill with a lasso, but folks often wondered why he was so guarded. You see, Jack's heart carried a weight, an old wound from his past he kept locked away, making him reluctant to trust or form attachments. This was his life, solitary, predictable, and safe. One day, word came to town that a ruthless outlaw named Rafe Maddox had been terrorizing settlements along the trail. Maddox's gang robbed ranches and left destruction in their wake. Then, one fateful evening, Maddox rode through Lone Pine, his gang ransacking the town and leaving it in ruin. As Jack witnessed the devastation, he felt a pull in his gut, a need to protect the town he'd quietly grown to care for. Sheriff Tate, desperate for help, approached Jack and said, "We need someone with guts and grit to track down Maddox and bring him to justice." But Jack shook his head. "I ain't no hero, Sheriff," he said, backing away. The weight of his past held him back. He feared that stepping up meant risking his heart, and he wasn't sure he had it in him. "There are better men out there for the job," he muttered, but his gaze lingered on the townsfolk, the families who now feared for their lives. Deep down, he knew this was his chance to make a difference, but doubt gnawed at him. That night, an old drifter named Jedediah, who'd seen more dust and danger than any man alive, approached Jack. "I've seen that look before, Jack," he said with a knowing grin. "You reckon you ain't up to it, but here's the thing, courage don't mean you ain't scared. It means you're willin' to face what scares you. If you don't, son, you'll be runnin' from it your whole life." Jedediah handed Jack a worn leather vest, a symbol of courage he'd passed down from one brave soul to the next. Jack took it, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. Jack awoke at dawn, tightened his hat, and with one last look at the town he'd called home, he saddled up. He was leaving the familiar safety of Lone Pine behind, venturing into the rugged, untamed wilderness of the frontier, where danger lurked in every shadow and trust was a scarce commodity. This was it, there was no turning back. As Jack rode further into the wild, he faced test after test. He battled fierce storms, crossed swollen rivers, and encountered hostile territory. Along the way, he formed a reluctant alliance with a sharpshooting woman named Belle, whose brother had been killed by Maddox. Together, they shared tales of hardship and grief, building a bond that grew through the challenges they faced. Jack also met an old tracker named Clem, who knew Maddox's tactics and taught Jack the art of silent tracking. However, every mile closer brought them face to face with Maddox's hired guns, testing Jack's newfound courage and pushing him to his limits. Eventually, Jack and Belle reached an abandoned mining town, a hideout of Maddox and his gang. This was the heart of darkness, a place that tested every fiber of Jack's resolve. He felt his old fears creep in, the weight of his past doubts returning. But Belle reminded him, "You've come too far to back down now. This is where we take back what Maddox stole." In the dead of night, Jack and Belle launched their ambush. Bullets flew, and the air was thick with gunpowder. In the midst of the chaos, Jack found himself face to face with Maddox. The two squared off in a brutal struggle, a test not just of skill but of will. Maddox taunted him, trying to shake his confidence. But Jack, drawing strength from everything he'd endured, held his ground. With a final surge of courage, he overpowered Maddox, putting an end to his reign of terror. As the dawn broke over the ghost town, Jack and Belle stood victorious. They had taken down Maddox, avenging countless lives. Jack felt a sense of peace settle over him, a reward greater than gold. He'd found not only his courage but also the strength to forgive himself and open his heart again. With Maddox's gang disbanded, Jack and Belle began the journey back to Lone Pine. Along the way, Jack grappled with the realization that he'd been changed forever by this journey. He wasn't the same guarded man who'd left Lone Pine. Now, he was a hero, but more importantly, he was part of something bigger than himself. As Jack rode into town, the people of Lone Pine welcomed him back as a hero. He'd faced his greatest fears, and in doing so, he'd become stronger and wiser. The man who once shunned connection had found a purpose and a place to call home. The town celebrated his return, recognizing the transformation he'd undergone. Jack brought back more than just peace to Lone Pine. He brought hope, courage, and a reminder that even the most ordinary among them could rise up to face the worst of enemies. His journey had inspired the townsfolk, teaching them that courage lives in every heart. And as he sat by the campfire that night, telling his story, he knew he'd given them something precious, the courage to face whatever came their way. The old cowboy looked around the campfire, his eyes shining with wisdom. "And that, folks, is the story of Jack McGraw," he said, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "He may not have been the fastest gun, but he was the bravest man I ever knew. Remember, courage ain't about never feelin' fear. It's about taking that fear by the horns and goin' forward anyway." The fire crackled as the story lingered, inspiring each listener to find the courage within themselves to face whatever challenges lay ahead.